The concept of a prequel is a very hot topic in modern cinema. It seems like everyone and their grandma wants a prequel to anything and everything. Want to know about wizards before the wizards you know? Fantastic Beasts. Want to know about this dude's second cousin once removed? The Hobbit. Want to know about dragon people before there weren't a lot of dragon people? House of the Dragon. See what I mean? There are a lot of prequels in this day and age. One franchise in particular that basically started this modern trend of prequel reliance is none other than Star Wars. They basically capitalized on the trend of prequel content with multiple movies and shows all being set before the main trilogy. Now, a question you may be asking is, what's the point? What exactly is the point of telling a prequel story? Well, generally, it's to tell the audience something we don't already know or expand on a concept or story only briefly touched upon in the main series. In Star Wars' case, the prequels told us about the events of the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship before his fall, and what the universe was like during the 19-year gap between episodes 3 and 4. So what more is there to tell when a story as important as that has already been fleshed out? Well, what about what happens like 5 minutes before the first movie? While it may sound strange saying it like that, in the context of A New Hope, it kind of works out pretty well. That movie starts off at the end of a chase sequence. So like, what happens right before? Well, that's how you get Rogue One. And let me tell you, I'm so glad they made this movie because Rogue One is one of the best Star Wars movies out there. I love this movie so much and I really don't know why. So that's why we're here today. I went back and rewatched Rogue One and analyzed the story in an attempt to truly understand why I love this movie so much, and I think I actually figured it out. This video will be broken up into 2 parts. First, my synopsis of the story, and then my analysis. If you wish to jump to specific sections, there will be time codes in the description. We open on the planet Lahmu as scientist Galen Erso and his family are attempting to hide from the Empire. However, their peace is disturbed when Imperial weapons developer Orson Krennic arrives to quote-unquote ask him to complete the Death Star, a massive battle station capable of destroying whole planets. The confrontation goes south and Galen's wife Lyra is killed. However, their daughter, Jyn, manages to escape and is saved by Saw Gerrera, a rebel extremist. Cut to 15 years later, and Imperial cargo pilot Bodhi Rook defects from the Empire, taking a message recorded by Galen to Saw Gerrera, who is currently hiding on the planet Jedha. Elsewhere, Rebel intelligence officer Cassian Andor learns of Rook's defection from an informant, as well as the existence of a planet killer. Jyn is currently at an Imperial labor camp, but is rescued by the rebels and brought to Yavin 4. The leaders convince her to find and rescue her father so that they can learn more about this planet killer. As they are preparing to depart, Cassian is secretly ordered to disregard his prior instructions and assassinate Galen Erso. Jyn, Cassian, and K2SO, a reprogrammed Imperial droid, travel to the planet Jedha, where the Empire is mining kyber crystals to power the Death Star, all the while fighting off Saw Gerrera's rebels. Caught in the crossfire of an ambush, the group is saved by the blind guardian of the Wills, Chirrut Imwe, and his friend, Baze Malbus. For those who don't know, the Guardians of the Wills are an order of warrior monks who aren't Force-sensitive, but more like Force-adjacent, for lack of a better term. They can sense using the Force, however not control it themselves, which is why a blind man is kicking so much ass. Jyn, Cassian, Chirrut, and Baze were all taken by Saw Gerrera's rebels, and Jyn is brought before Saw. He shows her Galen's message, where he reveals that he secretly built a vulnerability into the Death Star and directs them to retrieve the schematics from an Imperial databank on the planet Scarif. On the Death Star, currently orbiting Jedha, Krennic orders a low-powered test shot which destroys the capital city and much of the planet. Jyn and her group take Bodhi and flee as Gerrera remains behind to die. Grand Moff Tarkin congratulates Krennic before using Bodhi's defection as an excuse to take control of the project. Back with the team, Bodhi leads the group to Galen's Imperial research facility on the planet Edu. After crash landing on the planet, Cassian heads out to look for a shuttle to quote-unquote steal, or, in plain speak, assassinate Galen. However, when it comes down to it, Cassian can't pull the trigger. But he doesn't have to, because a rebel squad attacks and bombs the facility. Jyn makes it to the destroyed facility and holds her father as he dies in her arms. The group flees and returns to Yavin 4 in order to speak with the rebel leaders and propose a plan to steal the Death Star schematics on Scarif. The leaders, however, feel a victory against the Empire is impossible and don't approve the mission. Frustrated but still determined, Jyn leads a small group of rebel volunteers to recover the schematics. Arriving on Scarif on a stolen Imperial shuttle, which Bodhi names Rogue One, a disguised Jyn, Cassian, and K2SO enter the base while the other rebels attack the Imperials as a diversion. As the battle kicks off, the rebels learn of the raid from an intercepted Imperial communications and deploy their fleet in support. Jyn and Cassian learn they must transmit the plans to the fleet but can't get past the orbital shield gate, blocking the transmission. Things begin to go south as K2SO sacrifices himself so Jyn and Cassian can retrieve the data. On the beachhead, Chirrut is killed after activating the master switch to allow communication with the rebel fleet, with Baze dying shortly after. Still aboard the ship and now able to communicate with the rebel fleet in orbit, Bodhi informs the fleet that they must deactivate the planetary shields in order to allow the transmission of the schematics. Soon after, he is killed as a grenade destroys his ship. The rebel fleet destroys 2 Star Destroyers, which results in their wreckage destroying the shield gate. Jyn and Cassian obtain the schematics but are ambushed by Krennic. They fight him off and transmit the schematics to the rebel command ship just as the Death Star enters orbit and fires a low-powered shot, killing Cassian, Jyn, and all the remaining rebel ground forces. With the plans received, the rebel fleet prepares to jump as Vader arrives and boards the command ship. In the last moment, a small starship with Princess Leia aboard manages to slip away with the Death Star plans, directly leading into the start of Episode 4. Right off the bat, this isn't your typical Star Wars movie. It's a war movie that shows the grim reality of fighting a losing war against an unstoppable opponent. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It shows that war is sometimes about ambushing a squad of Imperials to stop them from shipping highly dangerous materials off-world. But oh shit, a kid gets caught in the crossfire, but who cares because it's for the greater good. And that's what I want to talk about first, this quote-unquote greater good justification. What I find really interesting about Rogue One is the fact that they actually bring attention to some of the horrendous actions some characters have to commit for the greater good. In wartime, more often than not, the powers that be use the greater good argument to justify any and all atrocities. And again, in Star Wars, we've never seen this before. Watch the Clone Wars and nearly everyone commits war crimes on a daily basis with no repercussions or guilt. In Rogue One, Cassian shoots an unarmed man in the back and doesn't just brush it off. We can tell by his expression that he hates himself. He hates what he does and has had to do for most of his life. But all he needs to do is take a hit of for the greater good, and he'll be better until the next atrocity. Again, before Rogue One, this had never been shown before. The rebels were always shown as the quote-unquote good guys, and the Imperials as the quote-unquote bad guys. And I think that's one of the best aspects of Rogue One because it actually shows us that reality. It shows us that war is more nuanced than that, and things aren't always so black and white. War, if anything, is about all of the shades of gray in between. When you have a soldier, you need them to be loyal. They have a unifying cause, but they also need a unifying objective. If you tell them time and time again that what they're doing is all for the greater good, then you can get them to do virtually anything, rebels or Imperials alike. Hey, blow up this shuttle of Imperial recruits. Why? Well, it's for the greater good, because if you don't, they'll become stormtroopers one day. Hey, hijack this shuttle with medical supplies. Why? Well, it's for the greater good, and the rebellion needs those supplies more than the Outer Rim. Hey, assassinate this scientist. Why? Well, it's for the greater good, because he could potentially build stuff for the Empire. You see what I mean? That argument can be applied to nearly anything. Another thing that I find really interesting about this movie is that if you take the basic, what you're doing is for the greater good concepts and apply it to the Empire, it'd work just as well. I mean, hell, think about it this way. When Luke blew up the Death Star, he canonically killed 1.7 million military personnel and 250,000 civilian contractors. Now, view this as an Imperial. A terrorist claiming to follow an old defunct religion just killed the entire population of a city. If you were with the Empire, your higher-ups could tell you that you need to kill this extremist for the greater good of the galaxy, and you'd follow that order in a heartbeat. Now, I may be applying English major bullshit to this interpretation, but I think that's one of the core concepts of this film. Hell, the tagline is, "Rebellions are built on hope," or "Rebellions are built on the belief that what they are doing will be justified in the end." That they have hope that what they're doing, what they've been asked to do, will matter for something. Cassian's speech before the Scarif assault demonstrates this excellently as he states,
"Everything I did for the rebellion. And every time I walked away from something I wanted to forget, I told myself it was for a cause that I believed in."
Rogue One shows us that the rebellion, while just, isn't always in the right. It shows us that in times of war, even the heroes need to become villains, all for the quote-unquote greater good. Because without that,
everything we've done would have been for nothing.
This leads me to my next point. Rogue One is a war film through and through. In fact, I'd argue Rogue One is the most war film out of all the Star Wars films. The main thesis of any war film is to demonstrate the real horrors of war and essentially let the fighting do the talking. They typically explore themes of desperation, struggles, and sacrifice, and don't glorify the fighting but show its horrors. I'd argue that a bad war film overly glorifies the concept of war. They make it seem like it's honorable to die in a conflict while ignoring the realities of what war actually entails. A real war is not so honorable. A real war, for lack of a better term, is disgusting. War breaks men mentally and physically. War is never a good thing, and war should be the absolute last recourse in any conflict. And again, Rogue One actually discusses this concept. When Jyn is proposing her Scarif plan to the Rebel Council, they are actually scared. They don't want an open conflict with the Empire because they know what war entails. They know what they're up against, and they know people will die. This is the first time we've seen some kind of aversion to an all-out conflict in the Star Wars universe. To me, that humanizes the Rebels substantially more than any of the other films have. Watching the other Star Wars movies, I'd argue most people are probably quick to forget that the Rebels are mostly comprised of farmers, factory workers, bakers, and just the average Joe who's had enough of the oppression. They're an army, yeah, but at the end of the day, they're just regular people asked to do extraordinary things. Following this debate and Jyn's plan going to fruition, for the first time in any Star Wars media, we see what it's like to be on the ground, in the mud, running with the rebels as they bob and weave through the trees, avoiding AT-ACT fire, friends dying left and right as they narrowly escape. Typically, in Star Wars media, they glorify the fighting. The rebels beat the Empire and destroy the Death Star. The clones fight back against the CIS and save Coruscant. It's depicted from a mythic hero's point of view. Luke, the last Jedi, fighting the evil Empire. Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting against the CIS and the Sith. They are larger-than-life characters. Literal space wizards with magical powers with impeccable flipping abilities. But what about when the story is depicted from the Grunt's point of view? Most of the characters in Rogue One aren't what I'd call upstanding citizens. Jyn is a criminal. Cassian is an assassin. K2SO is a reprogrammed droid. Chirrut is a monk. Baze is an ex-monk turned merc. And Bodhi is just a cargo pilot. These characters aren't larger than life, and none of them will gain a mythic status like Luke or Anakin. And because of their mundane and troubled nature, they all make for the perfect protagonist for this type of film. If, say, Jyn was a Jedi, I believe her actions wouldn't have had as much impact as they would if she was just a regular criminal. Hell, I feel if there was a Jedi on the team, I feel the whole story wouldn't have had as much impact as it did. It's the portrayal of the common people in the Star Wars universe rising above themselves to fight for what they believe in that makes this war film as good as it is. And just like war, people die. Quickly and without meaning. Look at all the character deaths in Rogue One. Were any of them glorified? K2SO, shot to death. Chirrut, Baze, and Bodhi, blown up. Cassian and Jyn, caught in the Death Star blast. No one had a glorious and honorable death. They served their purpose, and then the reality of war caught up with them. There one moment, gone the next. No final speech, no going out on their own terms. Just war and death. Once again, we have never seen a Star Wars film where literally everyone dies. Sure, important characters die in other movies, but the whole cast? This again goes to show the horrors and reality of war, and further makes me love this movie even more, as f***ed up as that sounds. If you haven't caught on to the reoccurring theme I keep bringing up, allow me to explain. The reason why Rogue One is so good and so impactful is that it not only demonstrates the true horrors of war by showing the moral gray aspects of war and the death and destruction it causes, but it is also something we have never seen in a Star Wars property up until that point. It was new, it was fresh, and it told the story that it wanted to tell. Now, did we need this movie? Of course not, no. But what Rogue One did was expand on a concept briefly touched upon in the main series. It gave us, the audience, a better idea of what the rebellion had to do in order to win the war, the atrocities they had to commit in the name of the greater good, the battles they had to sacrifice countless soldiers for, and how even the most unlikely individual can rise up to become a real hero. No, Rogue One did not have to be made, but it is an excellent example of how to write a perfect prequel story.